Hello, Tommy. I keep my promise. I'm here. I keep my promise. I'm here.
I hope you understand.
I'm trying to help you while you're here. Trying to help. If you'd like to say anything, the room is yours. The room is yours.
You are now watching Turn to Gold on BB3 TV with your host, the Ghost Boy, Chris Cesare.
Hey everybody, happy October. This is Christopher Cesare and you're watching Turn to Gold on BB3 TV and on YouTube. Welcome back. Last week we had on our show two twin sisters from California, psychics, and it was nice to talk to Melissa and Bonnie and see how they were exploring their gifts and trying to understand the world around them. And as you know, each week I try to bring on somebody who is inspirational, somebody who brings a positive tint to the world, and where oftentimes you have so much drama and difficulty. And tonight I'm very honored. We have one of the legends in the field with us tonight. And in a few moments, we're going to talk about this gentleman and talk with him and hear about his experiences, learn his knowledge base, and I'd like to share him with you. Again, welcome aboard. And hello, everybody. Hello, Barry. Hello. Nice to see you. Thank you, Tom. Thanks. I'm doing very well. Thank you. For those of you who keep track, this is, I think, week 5 of the beard. My granddaughter likes the beard, so Pop-Up keeps the beard until the granddaughter says otherwise, and that's how it works. That is the rule. Hello, Vince Swan. Nice to see you. Hello, Lorraine. Hello, everybody. I'd like to jump right in and introduce my guest. We are both going to be at a shared event, and that event is going to be held in Sleepy Hollow, New York, Hudson Valley, which was where the Tales of the Horseman was written by Washington Irving and also Rip Van Winkle in the Catskill Mountains. And this, is to my knowledge, is the very first Parafest held in the area. And that is a post you'll see there. It's being held from 10 to 6 that Saturday, the 22nd. We hope to see you there. On the post, you see a bunch of people that I know you know from various authors and certain television shows, movies, and whatnot. And the hope is you can go out there and support that. It'd be a beautiful time of the year, full foliage. The leaves would be gold and green and orange, and so it's a great event. My guest this evening, as iconic, demonologist. And the first time I heard of a demonologist as a concept was back when I was in college as a teenager, and that was in reference to Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were coming to my college to give a lecture, and my friend next door had said to me that the Warrens were coming into town and they were demonologists. And as most of you know, my dad was a science teacher and taught chemistry, biology, and physics. And the concept of ghosts wasn't really one that was prevalent in terms of discussions in my household, nor was it encouraged. So I had no interest in seeing that whatsoever, no interest in seeing the Warrens. I'd rather go out and have a pizza, ice cream, or watch a baseball game. However, Jeff had mentioned the words to me that are magical in nature. They always are, and it's free. Being that it was free, I decided to go, and seeing them changed my life. At first I didn't think it would, and later on I realized it did, and that's how life works sometimes, correct? You look for a fastball and then comes the curveball. Well, my guest tonight knew them very well. In fact, they had dinner at his house, mom's house at one point in time, so he's an expert in many of these things. He has appeared on SyFy Ghost Hunters, I believe season 1 and 2, Animal Planet's The Haunted, Paranormal State and A&E, Finding Bigfoot, Most Terrifying Places in America. I mean, if there's a show, most likely he's been on it. He's also an author, Shadow Realms, a Demonology Handbook. And I am so excited to bring him on. So please, without any further mention, let's bring on the incomparable Carl L. Johnson. Hello, sir.
Hello. Good evening to you, Chris. And thank you for that splendid orientation and ovation. You have me blushing now. Yeah. I have made the rounds on the television shows. No.
Yes. Yes.
Quite a spectrum. Everything from from the most terrifying places in America to finding Bigfoot. I made that jump there.
Right. That's a broad spectrum. So young Carl, when does young Carl begin to believe that there might be something out there that is spiritual beyond the norm?
Let me try to remember young Carl. It's been some time because this year marks, although I was doing it even before then, an interest of mine. This marks 50 years of my being a paranormal investigator, researcher. Um, well, it started for me because I grew up in a haunted house in North Situate, Rhode Island. In fact, there's this nifty episode of one of those series, A Haunting, which has been in production recently. Hopefully, will be again. And they just had their 11th season. And one episode was called Dangerous Games. I've been in plenty of those shows, but this was the first one that told my actual story. It was about how I got into the paranormal research. And they have a young actor, teenage actor, portraying me, and another one portraying my twin brother, even though we're identical twins. So it's kind of fun to see. They had me interviewed, but it's fun to see me being portrayed. And I've had two actors play me. Boy, they really played me, I'll tell you. But it encapsulates how I got into that because I was growing up in a haunted house, and my sister and I experimenting with spirit board play probably augmented that, increased it somewhat, but it was already going on since the time I was very young. I guess my first experiences were when I was, let's see, if my sister was in a high chair, Keith and I were about 7 years old, my twin brother and I, when my mother went to take a drink of water from the spigot, the faucet, and before she could put the glass to her lips, all of a sudden we heard, and that water was gone, just transmuted, just vaporized, just went away. So we knew something strange was up in the house. We call that the thirsty ghost. Yeah. And so we got the knocks, the creaks, the bangs, the strange things happening in the house. Objects would appear and disappear, and something would take things and bring them to another part of the house. We turned around, like a woman's glove, for instance, a woman's glove that nobody in the house recognized appeared in the hallway. This is in my parents' house. And I went to get that. I said, wow, nobody recognizes it. So I picked it up, put it on the kitchen table. Next time I went to get it to look for the mate of it, but I'd never seen it before. It was gone. It never came back.
So things out of the norm. Were you frightened by these things, intrigued by these things? What was your reaction, if you recall, to these things that you knew weren't typical?
Oh, both intrigued and sometimes afraid. It was very inspiring to kind of have evidence of the supernatural, but at nighttime it was a little scary, of course, especially when the lady started to appear in the basement of my parents' house. I don't know what else to call her. She was a ghost, and she would show up, and I saw her 4 times, and it's remarkable to see a spirit, an apparition anyway, but I observed her. I think the longest I saw her was twice. I saw her for about 4 to 5 seconds. Okay. That's, as you know, that's a long time to see a ghost when you actually have time to reconcile to that you're seeing something, basically supernatural. You're seeing a figure from the past. You're looking at it and realize this is a ghost. This is what we call a spirit, a ghost. And I was able to watch her walk across the floor. I say walk. What was scary about this specter was that she would take steps as if she was walking, but make no sound. There was something so dang scary and eerie about that. And we had, one night it was getting so active that I had to go upstairs and sleep on the couch. I got to get away from this. And then the thunderous banging, the reverberation on the roof. I'm surprised it didn't wake up the rest of the household. Boom, boom. That night was pure terror. That was scary because I couldn't get away from it. What am I supposed to do? Go out to, my parents' car and go in there? Because then I'd be outside. Who knows what's going to get me out there?
It's interesting because one of the things you're acting to is losing control of the environment. You're not
Yes.
functioning properly because there's too much going on. And I think that happens in some of the more extreme hauntings where it's not just once in a while a chain rattles or a letter moves. It's just where it begins to affect your quality of life. It can, in a sense, because it changes what you're used to. And you also mentioned too, I thought about the concept of the gliding across the floor. This no sound. So it's mimicking, but not the exact same thing as walking in. And in cartoons, you often see ghosts depicted with a little point at the bottom. No leg, just a little point. And
Yeah.
when I did the apparition that was in my college, I almost never could see the feet. I just would kind of fade out. And I'm wondering if that's because of the interaction between the physical and the spiritual, or if that's some kind of thing where energy radiates so far from the source. Ever think about that? Why it is that they seem to walk or move differently?
Yeah, we must wonder because maybe the ground level when they were living in that space, maybe the ground level was different. Maybe the floor had been adjusted, reconstructed, or the ground was different, higher up, lower. They just don't seem to be able to make that touching point with the earth because
Right.
they don't rely on gravity to walk. They're kind of replicating how they were in life. So yeah, maybe there is some kind of magnetic levels. I'm sure it's particle related, where they can't really touch base with the earth, and they just glide along, they float. They can't manifest past a certain point.
Well,
Um,
I enjoy this, Carl, because
yes,
I'm
I
speaking with
do.
someone who thinks about these things, who's considered many aspects of many things that the casual armchair observer would never think to contemplate. And that's part of the burden, right? The more you know, the more you want to know.
Oh yes, I'm always trying to look for the cause, looking for the source, analyzing. I can't just accept that this is a spirit of, oh, this is a lady who died in the house, and she needs to cross over. She's lost. I mean, I don't know that. I don't know if you're doing a spirit a favor if you cross them over. Who knows where they're going to? Um, but I'm always trying to analyze that. What could make this? And I
Yeah.
came up with my theories on what produces a ghost. Ooh, by 1970, I had some ideas. I was a kid, but I had some ideas.
Have your ideas shifted over time? Are they still fairly similar, or they shifted over time for you?
Those ones are the same. Yeah, as far as origins of a spirit, I didn't know how to phrase it, and I didn't know anything about quantum mechanics or physics or
Right.
speculative physics. But I thought there's some kind of magnetism within the human mind, the human psyche. I used to use words like that even in my mid-teens that projects. It's created by life, and the spirit takes on its own essence,
Right.
its own reality, and it continues on after bodily death. That's what I was thinking back then, and that's been fairly consistent. That we create that spirit. I mean, this goes apart from faith or belief. It's just like, what makes this tick? What's happening here? And I think we do. I think it's on a quantum level that we project this thing, this image of ourselves, and it is us essentially. And that's what that conveys the mind. And I think thought, although while its mechanics are basically physical, it's also quantum. It's a projection, it's a holograph to our thought process. And it's hard to define what consciousness is really, but something of it seems to carry over.
Yes, yes. As a school teacher, I can tell you, I'm have the same with my students. Are they conscious or not? I
Yeah,
we have
define
some.
consciousness at different times of the day.
Yes, we
Yeah,
have some great questions in the chat room, but one
already,
from me
sure.
first, if you don't mind.
Please,
If
yes.
a person, a lay person, was come up to you and just ask you, sir, Mr. Johnson, I'm new to all this. Help me understand. What do you think a ghost is? What would you say to them?
Well, I always start off by saying, I don't know either, but I might be able to guess some. Uh, it's a less physical aspect of ourselves. It's the non-physical component of our minds. And the ghost looks like it thinks it should. And we've also got the interpretation of the observer. It's a projection. I basically call it a projection with some thought to it. But the thought process seems limited. It can't do everything.
Right.
It may think like we do, but it can't speak like we do. This is a consciousness, we assume, that lacks a glottis, lacks a mouth, lacks the physicality required for a presence, for speech. Yet sometimes they speak to us. It's got to be on a different level. So basically, it's the non-physical projection of what we are. And ghosts usually look like they think they're supposed to. You know, they're at a certain age, usually the age at which, if they are the spirit of a deceased person, they look like the person did when they died.
Got it.
And although sometimes they look younger, sometimes they look like themselves in youth or in childhood, which is an interesting concept.
And we spoke about perception and lens before the show. Let me go to the next question, and we'll get back to the idea of perception, you and I. This is a question. It's from Sarah, and she states her statement: the loss of the illusion of control is a scary thing. It also causes the body of a person to produce a certain type of emotional energy.
Oh yeah, that lightning bolt that we produce. Emotions do have a lot to do with it, I think, because they increase the projection, the energy level we output when living. And a more vital person may be a more energetic ghost if they were more vital in life and very emotional. Although there's a contradiction to that too. Some of the more atmospheric residual haunts are just people going about their business, and they're not aware of their living observers.
Right.
I saw that sometimes when I was at historic Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. I was employed there for 14 years. And sometimes you see a person just in like old attire, vintage clothing, walking the grounds. And I wouldn't think anything of it until I really looked. Now I looked again and the person wasn't there anymore. And I said, I think I just saw me a ghost, because where did they go? They wouldn't have run off that fast. So I think we got some residual activity there. The strange thing about what we call residual or playbacks or atmospheric haunts is if you are fortunate enough to be able to observe them repeatedly, after a while they turn and look at you. It's like they take on an awareness if you're interested in them. So
I guess it's true that if you are part of the environment, you become part of their awareness over time, correct?
Mm-hmm. I think the past is being replayed. The past still exists in a sense. It's not available to us most of the time, but it's still there. Right. But then again, talk about the past. The past isn't all contained. You're going back to lineal time, and it's still progressing. You're looking at that person moment to moment, minute to minute, that ghost person. So time is still going on for them. It's just you have a quantum flux shot back to that. I can give you some examples of that, in fact. Well, briefly, that house they call the Conjuring House in Harrisville, Rhode Island.
I haven't heard of it. What's this place?
Oh, wow. That's got class to it. Look at that. That is the Conjuring House. That is 1677 Round Top Road in Harrisville, Rhode Island. And it was made famous and infamous when the movie The Conjuring was released in 2013, which very loosely is predicated on happenings in that house that occurred in the 1970s.
And you've been there?
I have been there a number of times, yes. Frequent visitor for a while. But I first went there in September and October. Let me back up a little bit. August and September of 1973. And a little bit in October. Our investigating team from Rhode Island College was there. And that was my introduction to this house. Of course, I wasn't portrayed in the movie, and that's perhaps fortunate. But there's something about that house. It's billed as the most haunted place in the world. Well, yeah, when something's happening, it is. I thought my parents' house was the most haunted place in the world when activity.
When there, yes.
Yeah, when I was being scared of it, yeah. But there's a unique time displacement that occurs in that house. Mrs. Perrin, Carolyn Perrin, the lady of the house in the 1970s, I believe this. She went into the what was the kitchen then is now a parlor room there, set up there, and she went into the kitchen, and there were, I believe, two men seated at a table, and they had pewter tankards. They were dressed in clothing of an earlier century. Now, okay, ghost sighting, not surprising in that house. What was super unusual about that vision was that Mrs. Perrin walked into that room and was startled to see these two men sitting there in old-fashioned clothing, drinking from pewter tankards. They were startled by her. These two figures turned and looked at her with obvious astonishment. Like they must have been thinking,
What is she doing here?
yeah, who is this slim, scantily clad lass? And then they vanished. But they were equally startled by her. It was a time flux, like time projected onto a plate that's two-dimensional, and yet it's everywhere at the same time. Strange concept. When Corey and Jen Heinzen acquired the house 3 years ago, and they invited me for the closing of the house because I had such a history with that place, I went there with my paranormal research partner, Elise, and I introduced her to Jen and Corey. And when I went into what's now a parlor room, I said, "That's that mirror, large rectangular mirror. Why, that was there when the parents. I remember that mirror when the parents owned the house
Decades ago.
Yeah, so that meant like 4.5 decades earlier. And I believe Norma Sutcliffe, a successive owner, had the mirror up there. So 'cause I visited while she was in tenure of that house. And I said, I got to look in that mirror. I haven't seen my reflection in that mirror for I don't know how many years now. So I looked in the mirror. This is true. It's my own experience. I looked in that mirror and I saw myself in my reflection as I appeared when I was 18 years of age. And of course, I'm like quite startled by this. I start to call out, Corey, Elise. And I said, no, as soon as they come in here, I'm sure it's going to be gone.
Right.
All I can do is memorize this. I know it's not a trick of the light. It's not the sunlight outside doing this. I'm going to remember this as real. I'm not going to think I imagined it. This is not a hallucination. I am watching myself. And I had my modern red polo shirt on. And, my reflection was moving as I moved. However, I looked 18 again. I had sideburns. I mean, that's projecting me from the 1970s when I first got there. Yeah, I mean, even the women had sideburns back then, I remember. And I had shoulder length hair. I just looked, younger.
Right.
And I'm looking, I had such nice eyebrows back then. And I'm looking at this. I spent at least 3 minutes till they started to call for me. So about 3 minutes looking at it. I am seeing this. I will never think this an illusion. I mean, I don't know how it's projected, but this is what I'm seeing.
Right.
But finally, I had to just move away. Imagine my disappointment when I went into the bathroom and they have a full-length mirror in that bathroom still there. And I saw myself as I looked, nowadays. And it's like, wow, things really did change, didn't they? But I actually saw myself. I must have left some impression in that house. I've always felt welcome by the house and in the house. I think it's not so much that that house in Harrisville is haunted as it is the haunting. It has something to do with its location. And I just saw myself as younger. That was remarkable. And that was the same room where Carolyn Perrin had her vision of seeing men seated at that table of pewter tankards. So yeah, it's things happen in that house. Wow. Nobody's gotten lost in it yet, but
which is good. You mentioned the fact sometimes people will experience something, but if another person comes into view, they tend to lose that energy, that intensity, that moment. But sometimes we do get fortunate enough to have some lasting image, something you take away from investigation. And I'm going to caution the viewers out there. I'm going to put something out here. It's pretty scary. It's a photograph that Mr. Johnson shared with me this evening. I'm going to put it on the screen. So just, if you get startled easily, cover your eyes or step away. But here we go.
To give people a little preparation.
This face right here.
Yeah. Did you want me to explain it?
Please.
Try to explain it. To the best of my knowledge, this is the face of a demon. It's rare to photograph a ghost legitimately, to capture its image. This is demonic. It was a demonic haunt that I was addressing. I was called in. I did not take the picture. The homeowner did, as he and his family were being driven out of the house. There was so much activity going on there. Dinner plates flying around, like moans, screams. They had to leave. And that wasn't the only time they left. Eventually, they didn't come back. They had to go over to his wife's sister's house. So his name's Tony. He forgot his camera on a table because they were hurrying to get out with the children. Right. And he said, oh, all my paranormal evidence is on that camera. So he went back in to get the camera off the table. And standing at the top of the stairs and going to the bedrooms was a figure of a man standing there. And he had the presence of mind to take one more picture, get that picture. He didn't know what would come out, if anything. That's what came out in his picture, and it's beyond weird.
Yes.
It's got like kind of reptilian eyes, like slits for eyes. It has a distended jaw with a lolling tongue. It has dentition. You can actually see molars. And it's
It's not
wonderful.
comforting. It's not comforting at
Oh
all. I
no, it's
mean,
not wholesome. It's kind of tough for me to look at, but I've analyzed it. I mean,
yes.
imagine getting your picture and that's what's there.
Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the few things I can relate to vividly in that during the haunting at Geneseo in the college there,
Yes.
my friend Jeff had said, let's get a photograph of whatever this thing is. And there was a moment where I could see this thing right above my bed, floating and looking right at us. And Jeff couldn't see it. I said, the dead thing looking at us, that's the ghost. I don't see it, but I can see it as clear as I see you. And so he said, if you can see it, take my camera and you take the picture. And I took the picture, I ran out of the room, but the picture I took was this. And I'll blow it up a little bit so you can see the skeletal image, the pelvis, the spine, the rib cage, the sternum. It was so scary for me to see the image of a human skeleton there where I was pointing where the thing was. And so cool proof, but what a horrible reminder. And sometimes I tell people, you'd like the evidence, I understand, but sometimes the evidence is tough to deal with. If I think that my girlfriend or my spouse is having an affair, I can hire someone to follow her around, detective, and
Yeah.
they're going to see what's happening. Maybe she's going bowling. Maybe it's a night out, right? And so, but if that detective comes back and puts an envelope on that table, says, "There you go." What is that? That's your proof. I don't know if I want to see that. I mean, is it yesterday? Is it my bed? Is it my friend? Is it, I mean, sometimes you have to be careful what you ask for because you may get exactly what you want, correct? So I think it's important in many areas of life. Understand what your goals are and understand you may reach those goals. Is that truly what you want? Because another photograph share with me is this one right here. This is also terrifying to me.
That's another demonic face. And it's one of those things, it's not super clear until you really look at it, and then it's terrifying. It's horrific. You can see black lips, you can see a black mouth, you can see the nose, the eyes there.
Yep. Absolutely.
I know the person who took that photo. Actually, that is the face of a client, someone I came to help, and she was experiencing fits of disassociation she attributed to demonic possession. And she took a picture of herself, and I was there. She took a picture of herself when she was under one of these spells, and that's what happened. That's what came out. I've had that analyzed. I've had other people look at it. We don't know what could have produced that, unless it was staged, contrived, and it wasn't. I know that.
Right.
So there's two demonic faces, and I think they're supposed to look disturbing, just like disease. People smell or sense, the symptoms of a disease that's repugnant. Or food that's gone rancid. You're supposed to be repelled by that.
Right. You don't consume it. You don't take it in.
No, but that's why they look. And people who have seen apparitions, most people I've talked to that have seen it, everybody wants to see one. If they're, especially if they're like a paranormal investigator, or those are their interests. They want to see one until they do, and then they don't want to see one again. Generally.
Yes, and I think that's fair, Carl. I mean, somebody like you who's been doing this for decades now, you understand that there are great things to be learned, and there are also things to be cautious of. Everything physical environment is a safe place to be walking in, to legal issues, to psychological issues, to the spiritual. It is no joke. And one of the things that I thought was really amazing and interesting is that you took the time, you sat down, and you worked on with Lana Brock a book,
Yes.
Shadow Realms, a handbook for demonology. And I think it's important, right? Because you take what you know and you share it.
Yes, and I like the way it came out, actually, because my co-author, Now, Lana, I was on the phone with her a little earlier. She's a talented writer. She's an accredited theologian, has a degree, as a minister, and went to college for that study. And I knew she had a talent for phrasing, and I figured, I'll have her write the introduction to my book. She ended up writing about half the book because I liked her style so much. I said, you got to write a chapter. You got to keep this going. So I had my friend and colleague Tom D'Agostino contribute the introduction and dedication. And then Lana wrote a lot of that book. And it's a series of essays, case testimonies, and speculation, and photographs. So I was happy with it the way it was, engineered. It's 300 pages precisely. Didn't even plan that. 300 pages. I would make some changes in it if I was writing it over again. Hopefully, I will be writing another book, and I plan to. So, but it is, as it seems, as the title conveys, it's a handbook. It's something you might want to place in your backpack if you're going on a paranormal investigation or preparing for one. Let's see what this guy Carl did in this situation. Does Carl have any answers for me? I have things I would have done differently, things I maybe not did wrong, but would have done them better, would have approached the case, the situation differently, things that worked for me. So it's just the benefit of my personal experience. It's certainly not the definitive work on demonology, but it's my perspective, talking about perspectives again. This is my angle, and this is what I've experienced. I really like the chapter, Beware Those Dolls. If anybody's got a phobia about dolls, especially clown dolls, and Lana wrote Beware Those, she contributed Beware Those Dolls Part 2.
Got it. So yes, clown doll sounds scary, both aspects of the clown and the doll. Now, the book, of course, is meant to be a guide. Yes. And, that means you read through it, you internalize it, you try to apply it to the best of your ability. We talked about a lens. I noticed there's a cross around your neck. This is the book that was used during the blessing by Father Charles Manning of my college dorm room. And so sometimes priests, ministers, deacons, rabbis, theologians, they'll use a certain text that's been passed down over time, been embedded in a sense. Sometimes they pick certain passages they think would be useful in trying to communicate, to understand. And you're tracing back your footsteps over the past 45, 50 years. Have you maintained a Christian point of view in quotes? Have you adapted anything like a Buddhist or a Wiccan approach? Or how have you navigated all these philosophies that are all around us?
Well, first I'll say that my footsteps aren't quite as rapid as they used to be, not quite as flexible.
Guilty as charged, Your Honor, yes.
Yeah, I'm still making my way around. Well, I identify with Christian, all right, but Christian with an explanation. That was my upbringing.
Right.
But
I would say perspective, correct? So you saw the world
it is perspective because I incorporate what seems to work at the time it works for me.
Yes.
I don't exclude any one faith or belief. I draw from it. Like the late Bruce Lee, the martial artist, of course, he was so good because he became a celebrity. That's why he's so known. But he certainly had his own discipline, and he was fantastic. And Bruce Lee, in his Jeet Kune Do martial arts, that was not exclusive to any one discipline. It was incorporating what worked for him at the time. Be it Taekwondo, boxing, judo. He used what worked and amalgamized these disciplines, and, made a focused train. And he said, in fact, one of his quotes is kind of biased, but he said, "Show me a karate expert and I'll show you a dead man."
Oh, geez.
I don't agree with that, but that's kind of an extreme observation. But his point was, don't get locked into one system. Use what works at the time. He also said something I've incorporated into paranormal investigation. Play seriously. Enjoy what you're doing. I wouldn't be involved in paranormal research and even demonology if it wasn't enjoyable on some levels. But you got to take it seriously too. Play seriously. I would tell people when I was running the ghost hunts, the ghost tours, I call them the evening tours at historic Slater Mill, 3 buildings on the campus thoroughly haunted. I would say, now we're here to have fun, just to, like, so people wouldn't get giggly or anything, but play seriously. You'll get better results. Play seriously. Yeah. So it's, it would take a whole explanation, like probably most of the show, but my philosophy is called Carcosan.
Okay.
And that means willing to incorporate fantasy, but grounded in reality. Carcosan comes, Yeah, well, it's incorporated into the writings of H.P. Lovecraft
Okay, yes, yes. I've
and
heard of it.
Robert W. Chambers, precedent. And so Carcosan, it was actually Ambrose Bierce coined that term Carcosan. It was
These are big names.
yeah, there they are. They're renowned. The
Yes.
Lost City of Carcosa it's a fascinating short story, and Robert W. Chambers incorporated that into his The King in Yellow, and then H.P. Lovecraft adopted that and like furthered it. So Carcosa, yeah, it's a dark fantasy realm, but
I love
based
that.
in reality, the reality I perceive. So I would call myself a Carcosan.
That's very
And
cool.
I want to devote a whole show to that. I'll
Well,
tell
I
you.
love that because I think the human spirit, the human mind has to create, has to, like, say, enjoy, has to be invested in what they're learning and experiencing. That's hence start, the Arthurian tales. They're amazing. The mythologies of the Norse. I mean, they're epic, Gilgamesh stories
Yes,
and tales and mythologies that really incorporate humanity, and meaning and purpose. And even today, with you have things like, Star Wars and Star Trek and these,
yes,
Stranger Things, the human mind wants to go beyond the mundane. And I think that
that is,
allowing that is important.
and that is the basis of Carcosan. The human mind wants to transcend. It's not satisfied. It's not endemic to the human psyche to be complacent, to be
Right.
satisfied. We're just not. And that's why I'm also a cathonicist, which is somebody who explores the
God bless
classic
you.
myths.
No, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you.
Yes, yes,
Yeah. You put a little, actually, H.P. Lovecraft's monstrous creation, Cthulhu, the tentacled,
yes. Cool.
demigod from under the ocean that was banished here by the great old ones, and now he sleeps he reposes in deathless sleep, waiting for the stars to align, the stars to go right. But H.P. Lovecraft drew on chthonicists to create Cthulhu, the chthonists,
Right.
and so yeah. Well, I have a fondness for H.P. Lovecraft in part because he was my cousin,
Right. I noticed you had
second cousin.
right. You had gone to the cemetery, correct, where he's
Yes.
buried, and you had a ceremony there, correct?
Yeah, so several I have from time to time. I was doing them annually for a while, and then I resumed doing them. That's okay. He never called me,
You know, you're funny.
and I didn't write all those neat stories like he did. But of course, I'm happy about that because I found out I'm cousin to H.P. Lovecraft when I was researching him for an article. I was writing an article. I didn't know what would be the best way to promote this first service I gave, which was commemorated the 50th anniversary of Lovecraft's passing. That was March 15th, 1987. And so to prepare for this, I wrote an article on H.P. Lovecraft. So I started to research him through a book by L. Sprague de Camp called Lovecraft. That was what was basically available at the time. And I found hints that, wait a minute, that family name, place, this one, I'm related to him. We were both descended from Roger Williams, the founder of Providence, but I had found out it was closer. I had somebody do genealogical research, and he's my second cousin, related through 3 family lines. So I was just happy. I was married at the time. My wife was not happy
As
about
happy.
that. Yeah, she said, you're celebrating a devil worshiper. And I said,
Well,
he wasn't a devil worshiper. He was a materialist. He liked to think of himself scientific. Well, he wasn't.
that lens.
I said he was an atheist. What? Atheistic. Yeah. Well, that's even worse. But I'll show you what I've got here.
Yes.
Speaking about Mr. Lovecraft for a moment, I brought some show and tell.
Oh, very nice. Wow, that's
That
huge.
was my Ouija board. Yeah, that was made by Danny Perez. Fashioned that, and he gifted this to me. So yeah,
It's a nice gift.
yeah, isn't it?
Yeah,
Not that I advocate
caution,
you're getting on a spirit board. I do sometimes, but it's kind of a fun toy, as long as you're not, people don't get too involved with it and too carried away. Ouija boards, spirit boards, they just don't bother me. And I used to play on one when I was a teenager with my sister, and it's just, I don't know, they're just innocuous. They're there. They're a tool.
Right. Like anything else, it is a tool. It's the intent is the importance of use of the tool, correct?
Yeah, and they function. It's not I don't think it's a spirit moving your fingers. I think it's ideomotor. If you're lightly touching the planchette, the piece on the middle of the board, your fingers are going to shake a little bit. You're going to just move it. Yeah, sometimes you get uncanny messages that way. They're just kind of fun.
Right. Yeah. Well,
I could lose my demonology badge for that, but
you don't want to lose the demonology badge.
No.
You don't want to do that. We were talking before the show about lens perspective, and I gave the analogy: if the Red Sox
Yes, I like what you said.
played the Yankees, and let's say the Red Sox win 5-4. Those are the facts. 5 runs to 4 runs. Red Sox win. Yankees lose. The Red Sox fan will see that as a positive event. They made good plays in the field. They hit in the clutch. Good pitching. The Yankees fan says bad game. No one performed properly. They just stunk. So two people seeing the same exact experience. One's happy and one is sad because their lens, who they support, what they believe. And I think that's important too when talking about the spiritual and the paranormal, because there's even less materialistic evidence to look at, right? To understand, so it might lend itself to more confusion or misinterpretation. And as a person in the field who really has done most of what a person can do and has spoken to all across the country and done all these shows and whatnot, lectures and research, how do you attempt to bridge the gap of lens? How do you attempt to reach out and pull people together? Is that possible?
Well, we think in terms, we have to have certain commonalities because we want to focus on a concept. And these concepts that we see as real, they're rungs, to get us through life, to help us understand. We want to glue on to something. But it really is so multifaceted, infinite, in fact. Well, there was a young lady, I believe she was 16 years of age, and she won quite an academic achievement, a scholastic award. She got some kind of prize for it and a lot of notoriety because she came up with something of a theorem basing it on the Doppler effect, that, if you have 3 observers along a railroad track, and they're observing this train all at the same time. Some people see it coming.
Right.
One person will see it coming, another person will see it departing, and then there's that person in the middle. They've all got, in that moment, they all have a different interpretation, and all those interpretations are sound. They're all real, but they differ. The same reality, different components of it. And I came up with that. I didn't win anything for it, but when I was in 8th grade, I must have been 13 years of age, I stood up in we had a science class, and I wanted to deliver that. And I used words even then when I was there. I said like observation, observer, spatial. I used terms like that. So I gave my assessment of that. I say, now, if you had, I think I even used a train. I might have said an airplane. I said both, actually, a train or an airplane. If you're looking at this, one person's got it, but they got something different. Person in the middle got something different. And I went on. I said basically what this lady had said, except I didn't win anything for it. All my classmates in the room and the teacher laughed at me and jeered me.
Well,
he said, "Sit down, you nuts. Get on your train." Ha ha. But looking back, that didn't help my reputation at the time. I was always popular, but that was kind of a defeating experience.
Well, you want to respect, though. You did win something. I respect. That's good.
Yeah, when I look back, that was probably the biggest compliment I ever received in school. Besides a certain girl that became my girlfriend, she liked me for some reason. That was a compliment. But looking at that, back at that was a compliment. For a little while, I was Copernicus.
That's right.
I was Columbus.
Tycho Brahe. Yes, you were out there.
For a while, I was, ostracized, but for a good reason. That was about the biggest compliment they could get, that they jeered me for that, because they didn't understand it. I thought it was quite simple, observational. It was because I used, 4-syllable words, things that they were laughing at me. But no, that's a good concept.
Here's a good question. It's from the chat room. It's from Barry Martz, and the question for Carl: what are your thoughts if the population of fallen angels could grow? Have you given thought to this? For me, sometimes I wonder, with all the cruelty going on around the world.
Well, fallen angels are supposed to be a fixed number. In other words, they're not propagating. They're not begetting offspring. They were created. They always existed in that number. There are indications in the Holy Bible that they are a fixed number, because in the great revolt in heaven, 1/3 of the heavenly hosts were cast out of heaven. They followed Lucifer, who became Satan. That's the tradition. Yeah, that's the traditional outfit book. It's a kind of a frightening concept to think that maybe there are demons being born or fallen angels or coming into our, let's say if not being created, they're coming into our sphere more. And well, what do we have? When I remember I was astounded around 1978 when I said that we are reaching over 1 billion people on this planet. There's close to 2 billion people. Right. Now what are we? We're about on the cusp of 8 billion people.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So doesn't it make sense that there would be more output and more interest on the part of the demons? I say demons, we lack the scientific nomenclature. What do we term them? I define demonology as the systemized study of the lore and cultural traditions of wicked spirits. Simple as that. Right. So I can't give too much of an opinion on it, but I will own that it is a very frightening concept that maybe there are more demons, more fuel to the fire.
Yeah, and it is biblical in its source too, as Sarah writes, the watcher angels in the book of Enoch said to have given rise to the hybrids called the Nephilim. And so, it's this is not a new concept. Thousands of years ago, people were thinking the same type of thing. Could there be hybrids? Could there be more? Could they be growing? Could there, it's interesting to think.
Nephilim, no, they're fascinating in mythology, and it means Nephilim is plural. The Nephil, fallen ones, and they're really fascinating because they are the angels. However, the angels are interpreted. The angels looked upon humankind and found the daughters of man fair, found the human females fair, and copulated with them, and it produced this race of giants called the Nephilim.
Right.
And it's you wonder what murky reality is behind the fantasy here. And I say myth, I have to be open on that phrase, because all myths were at one time hard reality. They were believed in being real.
Absolutely.
Now to the non-believer, now we're too educated. Now they're myths. Like I earn the ire of some Bigfoot enthusiasts because I call Bigfoot a modern myth. You're saying Bigfoot isn't real? No, I didn't say that. I don't know. I've been close to one. I'm sure I was close to one. I heard it. It was quite distinct. I didn't see it. But yeah, it's a modern myth in the sense that it's wonderful because we're not sure. Most people are not sure if this Bigfoot thing is real. Right. Eyewitnesses are sure. And it's on that borderline. It's real and yet it's not. It's a cryptid. So it's believed in and yet not. So we're debating the existence of what we call Bigfoot, these hominid-like creatures. And so it's a modern myth. It's believed in and yet not. Go back 1,000 years, Odin, Thor were believed in by the Norse.
Yes.
And a lot of people didn't care about them. Seafarers had to believe in them because that was, their guiding force. So H.P. Lovecraft said it in a good way. I think he said, the chief delineation between theology and mythology resides in one's degree of acceptance,
Yes.
So all myth was at one time reality. Well, unless you get into like Tolkien.
Like the Egyptians, right? With Set and Isis and Ptah.
Fascinating, yes. And that was very real to these people. And I even fall into that bias. We tend to think we're too educated now.
Right.
It was, you go back 3,500 years, that was very real to those people, to the ancient Egyptians. And that was their system. But now we have, we're enlightened. We have modern religion. So that's got to be right. We've got to get it right after time.
Well, if you think about that too, the concept of an invisible God,
yes,
of an all-seeing God. In other words, I'm sure to the polytheists of the time, the concept of the Jewish deity or the early Christian deity would be almost absurd to them. So wait a second. There is nothing you can point to say that it is real, and yet you believe with all your heart and soul. That'd be challenging for them.
Right. The concept of Yahweh and the Tetragrammaton, Yad-He-Hoveh. If I had a time machine, I'd screw myself up bad. I don't know what I'd do, but I'd probably manifest in some volcano or something. But I would love to go back.
Yes.
3.5 to 4,000. Let's even scope it more. I'd like to go back about 5,000 years, far, about 3,000 BC.
Okay.
All right, I wouldn't have any modern conveniences. It'll get old fast. But what would I see in the sky? Would I see an occasional UFO or some kind of craft to go over 3,500 years before? What would God be there then? Would Yahweh be attainable? Would I hear his voice? The precursors to the Hebrews, would believe in him and talk about him. Him, El, the god El. But I wonder if there were spacecraft in the or alien craft, however we phrase them. Well, what was going on in the skies then? What made these people believe? Was manna real? Was there a manna machine in the great Exodus? I wonder what this is predicating for. And I have to speak about it, apart from faith, I have to speak about it objectively.
Right.
Because we just don't know. There's murky origins.
Here's a question for you, and I part this myself with no resolution. The concept of faith is simplistically that you believe without seeing, without
Mhm.
proof. Let us presuppose that you or I or others have seen the afterlife. We've seen spirits. We've seen ghosts. In essence, then, part of our faith is already taken away because we don't have to have faith to know it exists. Is that a bonus? Is that something that's negative? How do you wrestle with the idea that you don't have pure faith now because you've actually seen?
Yeah, I don't do very good with faith. A lot of my faith has been kicked out of me, just experientially. I used to belong to a very fundamental church back in the 1980s for a few years, and we had disciplers, their system. I
Right.
spoke openly to my discipler that I have questions that cannot be resolved. The universe is so inexpressibly old and unknowably vast, that it really puts a dent in my faith. I spoke frankly to my discipler, and he said, well, you're limiting God. You're saying God is not capable of that infinite creation. I said, well, I don't think you realize, and none of us realize, just how old and vast this universe is. I mean, it's really out there. Of course, then that got all over the church. That was supposed to be a private conversation.
Right.
Within 2 days, I was labeled a non-Christian.
Well, that's fear, right? That's fear.
Yeah, because I was violating their secure concept, their cocoon thinking. So yeah, it's tough to be faithful in such a universe where there's so many questions. And yes, you're right. You're seeing spirits and all that. It doesn't really answer my questions. It just throws some things out the window.
Right.
that I
Yes.
believe.
It eliminates some things for let's say narrow, more hopefully objective perspective. Sarah writes in the chat room, religion and the paranormal are perspectives to help explain the unknown. Fair?
Yeah, you can call. Actually, I call popular paranormal a quasi-religion and a pseudoscience. Because it gives people this rung, something to grab onto. Like, oh, we got to figure it out because we need our answers. So we see these phantoms that sometimes look like us, and objects in a room move. And is that PSI? Is that like psychokinesis, or is it a spirit reaching out and moving it to show us it's there? Maybe both. Like I've been. One person was interviewing me. I was calling, well, you're an atheist, Carl. I didn't say I was an atheist. Well, as you said in an interview, oh, well, that was like last year. Maybe I was an atheist then. It varies. My perspective has to vary. I can't stick with one system. And so, yeah, it's not a comforting way to be. But I mean, I'd rather to be a serious paranormal or parapsychological researcher, one has to be willing to say, I just don't know.
Right.
It's a tough thing to say, but I don't know.
You have to navigate. You have to adapt to your environment you're in that moment, right? To help best.
And it's frustrating to realize that many of these concepts, I'll never understand them. I'll never really know. But try to get closer to some core of what's true.
See, and that is the intellectual goal, right? To understand.
Yes. Well, we have to explore. That's why Ulysses went on the Odyssey. That's why Columbus departed, although he's not a hero anymore. But Columbus took that chance. The Vikings went out in there, the seafarers.
Right.
It's just the way we do it. We went to the moon. What's the purpose of that? But we did it. I can't take credit, but human beings did it. I'm part of that race.
Right.
That is absolutely remarkable. They risked their lives at every step of the way, to do that. And it's just the way we are. That is why the paranormal is so popular, because it gives us something to wonder about and maybe attain a few answers. And I'll tell you, I know people who, skeptic is a loaded term. I like to call myself a pragmatist. At least Giammarco Carlson, my research partner, she's the director of Panorama Paranormal. She's a pragmatist. She's a realist. That doesn't mean necessarily hardcore atheist. I think everybody wants to be kind of a skeptic, like, you can't fool me. I'm too smart. But all right, that's somebody's perspective. But if somebody says, no, come on, there's nothing to it. A true skeptic will always get in the last word in any debate. Sometimes that last word is, well, that's how they got the last word in.
Right.
But
that's a functionality, not any kind of answer.
Right.
Really.
No, it's something. Okay, I wasn't persuaded.
Right. So we're stopping because I choose to stop.
We think of the possibilities of this universe. The great conundrum is we don't know how it all started. Where did a quantum flux? What brought this universe and perhaps many other universes into existence?
Right.
We still can't talk about that intelligently or thoroughly. We still can't say. We can speculate, but we can't say, apart from faith, how this started. What we can see, with the highest electronic telescopes and super lenses, is we can see back a little over 13 billion years of light traveling. Right. 13.2, I think it is. And that's just how far back we can see. We don't know if there's something beyond that or what would be beyond that. They think creation started roughly 13 billion years ago. Planet Earth has been around for 4.5 billion years, not in the form it is now, but right. A congregate of rocks started coming together that long ago. We don't know. If you go back, if you could travel, not that it ever could happen, to these distant galaxies that are 13.2 billion light years away, the speed that, light will travel in 1 year. The distance light will travel in 1 year. Do we find it starting all over again? Do we find the same edge from where we started? We can't say. We can speculate. Neil deGrasse Tyson, I like to listen to him. But he says, these things scare him, and it's so wonderful to think that, and we don't even know about other dimensions, what they do. Do we go on eternally?
What I do, Carl, is ice cream. When my brain starts to hurt, I have some ice cream and I feel much better, and then I ground myself again from the infinite, from the Mobius strip, from the absolute. It's like ice cream. That's how I bring.
Well, you've just given me a license to eat ice cream now. He's more, Yes. What you're going to get with that is a brain freeze.
Right, yes, which is preferable.
I know, but you think of the marvelous scheme of this universe and how much we don't know.
Right. And
why is there a matrixing in nature where there are certain structures and propensities that are reproduced? You think of that, and of course the Fibonacci spiral that's replicated in nature. Yes. If I haven't said a word in a month or so, then I have to think about it. You think of that, and yet people have trouble believing in ghosts. That there are spooky replicants of ourselves. That's pretty small potatoes compared to the great mysteries of the universe.
I think you're right. Also, the aspect of time, because it looks like we're at 10 o'clock.
Oh, darn. We're just lighting the fire here.
It's a spark. Promise me to come on again in the future.
I'm willing to, eager to. I certainly will.
Because I would love that. I'm sure that the folks watching live now, the folks watching, later in the week, and then following on YouTube, on Facebook, will love what you're sharing. And I want to thank you sincerely for taking the time to be here with us. I really do admire you, and I really do appreciate
you. Sir. I as well you. I remember that time in Fishkill, New York, we were there for the paranormal conference, and I said, "No, I'm not. Thank you for the applause and telling me what I'm a legend and all, but there's somebody that's very important to this paranormal study and research. I'd like to bring him up now, Mr. Christopher de Cesare, and come on up." And you came up, and I applauded, and I said, "I changed my mind. You sit back down." Man.
Yes, a wise choice at the end. You regain your composure. No,
Yeah, I was just having fun with it, But thank you. Please do have me on again. We'll pick up where we left off, perhaps.
Absolutely.
If I can remember where we left off. Yeah.
Well, we'll take some notes. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight with my guest, Carl Johnson. I had a nice time. Please stay safe. Remember what I always tell you: if it's true and it'll help, please say it. With that, have a nice evening. Enjoy your week, and we'll see you next time on Turn to Gold. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
This has been Turn to Gold on BB3 TV.